Hello, and welcome to Shea Honey, the podcast featuring women who've made creative career change. In today's episode, I'm talking to Vanessa Edwards. Vanessa made a big career change several years ago and is now in the midst of making a second one. Vanessa, welcome to the Shea Honey podcast. Can we begin with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me, Hannah. So I am currently an early childhood teacher. I am originally from St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. I was born and bred there and then started moving around when I was maybe 15, starting with my family and then on my own. I've lived in 8 different countries. I've lived in 36 different homes and 4 different continents. And so I've had lots of location change.
Yeah.
And I'm currently living in the Netherlands. I've been here for, I'm in my 5th year.
Okay.
And previous to this, I lived in California in the US, before that in Switzerland, before that in New York, et cetera, et cetera.
Been all over the world. Amazing. So talk to us about your original job or career and how did you get into that field in the first place?
Mm-hmm. So my first career after university and master's degree was in international public health. And I chose that because it was a little bit of a means to an end for me. So I wanted an international career that would allow me to have a bit of a jet-setting life.
Yeah.
I wanted something that was, at least in some respect, a little contributing to the good of the world. I was a little bit curious as far as what my reaction to like real, true poverty would be. And I didn't want a job where I'd have to be inside all the time. So I sort of, checked all my criteria and thought of what might be best, and international public health was it. So I did my university in the US. I did my master's degree in Australia. And then I worked in that field for about 8 years for a couple different NGOs,
yeah,
and for the United Nations and for the World Economic Forum for a while. So that was my first career, and it gave me exactly what I wanted. So especially in the beginning, I was living in Nigeria and Senegal for part of the time, and I was, getting in a truck and going out to visit field projects and working on projects there for persons with HIV/AIDS. Then at the UN, I was working on projects for people with disabilities. I was doing a little jet set life. I remember there was a moment when I was doing a layover in Paris and I was looking up at the Eiffel Tower, and, it was one of those moments in life where I thought, I did it. I did it. This is it. This is what I wanted, and I did it. So it brought me what I wanted, and it was an exciting career. It was really interesting. I really, really loved the international aspect of it, of working with people from all around the world and working with people who just had lots of different life experiences, different from my own. So I did that for 8 years quite happily. And then towards the end, I think, like in many careers, when the longer you stay at it, you sort of moving up ladders, right? And it can often happen that it sort of takes you away from the original reason you were there.
Yes.
And that happened to me, and I didn't really see it happening. But then there was, with a life that was great. I was working for the United Nations. I was living in Geneva, Switzerland. I had a lovely apartment in the Old Town. Everything was perfect, really. But it had lost the meaning for me. And, working in international public health, it's a career like any other, right? You need to make money. We're not saints working in that career. However, I was very much of a generalist at that time. And I felt that it came to the point where I felt like, if they would just take my salary and go to X city in X poorer country and just throw up the money in the middle of the town square, I would be doing more good. I just didn't see my direct impact anymore. Even my indirect impact was harder and harder to see.
Yes.
And so it lost meaning, and I felt like it was a very dissonant existence.
Yeah. And so, because I'm aware that you've had more than one career change, and I think we'll come on to talk about that a little bit more as we continue. But tell us a little more about that point you got to when you decided to make that first shift into a different career.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So I've had sort of two career shifts. So this is number one, one completed and one in the works.
Yeah.
So indeed, I was feeling, listless, like my life didn't make sense anymore. So I was working for the United Nations at the time, and I was on a very, very secure contract, a lifetime contract.
Right. Wow.
And I knew when I had signed that contract, I remember signing it, it was like 2006, I think, and I signed it, it ended in 2038, something like this. And I remember thinking, there's absolutely no way in this universe that I'm going to stay here for 2038. But it did mean that I had a very, very stable contract. So under that contract meant that I had the right to do a sabbatical.
Right.
So this was really a gift. So I requested and was approved for a sabbatical, and I just asked for 3 months initially. And I just needed something different. I did have absolutely no idea at that point that I really wanted even a complete career change. I just knew I needed a break. So I asked for 3 months, and I thought, what can I do that's absolutely different than this? And so I signed up to go to a farm in Hawaii for 3 months.
Wow.
Which my husband still thinks is humorous. So I popped on a plane, went to Hawaii, and with the sort of very rose-colored glasses, I think of what this experience would be. I thought, oh, I'd be at a farm and back to my, tropical roots.
Yeah.
And I I showed up, and it was just this very, very dirty place with a very, very dirty refrigerator and a very, very dirty tent that I was meant to live in for 3 months. And friendly people, but people who I didn't necessarily connect with, didn't want to connect with. And I thought, no. So this is not going to be how I'm going to spend my 3 months. Anyway, long story short, I took myself on a plane and went to spend what I thought would be 3 months with my sister, who was in the process of wedding planning. So I thought, well, it's not what I expected to be doing these 3 months, but I was just looking for meaning at that time. I had lost meaning and connection.
Yeah.
And I thought I would find it in soil and plants. And in the end, I found it in, taking my sister for 10,000 dress fittings and checking flowers and all these things. And it was fine. It was what I wanted. It was human connection and something that was meaningful.
Yes.
So I stayed there and realized that I didn't have any desire to go back. So I asked for an extension on my sabbatical, which they had to give me. So the time went on. I started doing yoga several times a week and just started thinking, okay, I'm very clear that I don't want to go back to that, but I have absolutely zero idea what I want to do next. And so I went to a career counselor because I thought, okay, well, there is a professional way to go through this space. Yeah. And that was really helpful. So she gave me, these sort of psychological tests that are career focused. Yeah. That was good. I didn't find those necessarily very helpful, but I thought that's okay. I'm just going through the steps. And she gave me some really good advice. And she said, okay, so you have no idea what you want to do. You should start getting out there. Like, we need to see what the possibilities are. So just think about anything you're interested in and start doing informational interviews, right? Which I had never done before, but it was really helpful. So she said, get a job where you can bring some money in, but do it in sort of the off hours, the evening hours. Leave the daytime hours available to do informational interviews, because you just need to get through as many people as possible. Yeah. Just try to get some idea of what you want to do moving forward. And it was really great advice. And so that's what I did. I would just email organizations that, had something to do with something that I found, even a little bit interesting. And little by little, those possibilities became more and more concrete. Okay, so maybe doing, travel tourism. Yeah, that's interesting, but not really. They don't pay enough. And, doing international public health again, but for a different type of organization. Nope, that just sounds like more of the same. And so speaking to real people and listening to what their real life experiences were, finding out what their real salaries were, was extremely helpful. And in that process, I ended up totally by chance getting an evening job I put an ad up and I said, my name is Vanessa. This is my background. And I mentioned that I spoke decent French, not because I thought I would ever use it, but because in the US, speaking French, has some cachet. So I thought, well,
Yes.
this will
Yeah.
make it easier for me to get something.
Yeah.
And I was expecting to, in my head, I thought I'll help like some older people, maybe, go shopping for them or keep them company, chit chat. But a family with a 3 and 4 year old contacted me, and their children were going to a French international school.
Okay.
And they said, well, we know that you didn't mention anything about kids. You seem to have no experience with kids, but really, we just want somebody to take care of our kids, pick them
Yeah.
up from school, and speak in French to them.
Yeah.
Might you be interested in that? And I thought, well, I mean, not really, but I'm happy to meet. And I met them and I went on a little afternoon, trial with
Yeah.
them. And
Yeah.
it was just like love at first sight. It
Yeah.
really was. It was so much the opposite of what I was trying to get away from and what I was disillusioned with
Yeah.
at the UN, these long-term projects with, these intractable problems, which will not be solved in my
Yeah.
lifetime, right? And that
Yeah.
was my job,
Yeah.
going to, a little cute 3 year old who was crying because their ice cream fell on the floor. And I thought, I can fix this problem
Yes.
super
Yes.
quickly. And you're cute.
Yeah.
So I took the position part time, and very quickly I thought, no, there's something in this for me. Like this is the meaning I'm seeking. And so I went back to university and I got an early childhood Montessori credential and got a job at a Montessori school, and then got a job at a elementary school.
Wow.
Worked there for 6 years, and missed the international piece, right? So it was a really, again, it gave me everything I wanted. It gave,
Yes.
it was the connection, it was the meaning, and it really worked for a long time. I did it for 7 years in the US, and then I missed the international piece, and then I got a job at an international school in the
Yeah.
Netherlands. So that was sort of the best of both worlds.
So is that how you found yourself in the Netherlands for teaching?
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. And I didn't actually mean to stay in the US as long as I did, but as life will happen, I met my now husband at the
Yes. Okay.
time. He wasn't ready to move. Then we had our
Yeah.
son, and life
Yeah.
just sort of
Life
happens
happened.
along
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And so you worked as a teacher for quite a long period of time. So how
I
many
am
years were
working
you?
as a teacher. Yeah.
So you're still doing that now? Yeah.
I am still working as a teacher. I think this is my 11th year.
Okay. So as we've mentioned already, you're in the process of another career shift. So talk to us a little bit about that and how that's gradually come about over the years of teaching and what's led to this point now.
Yeah. So again, it started from an unexpected seed, and I think this is something that's it's nice to hear, maybe, like, because sometimes I think when things start from an unexpected seed, people don't give credit to it, and I think, oh, that was just some silly thing.
Yeah.
But it's often just some silly thing that it's like you uncover a rock and you just
Yeah.
didn't know what kind of beautiful ecosystem lived there underneath the rock.
Yes. Yeah.
So it was the same. So when I was still in the US, I met my now husband and I moved into his place. And I thought, right, we need to do a little bit of a facelift on this place. And so we set about to painting it, et cetera, et cetera. And quickly discovered that doing it on our own was absolutely not going to work. And so we hired an online interior designer. And I fell in love with every single thing about the process.
Yeah.
And shortly thereafter, we got married, we had a child, and I took a year and a half off work and then went back to work. And during that whole time, I started, listening to interior design podcasts and taking little short courses and buying a million interior design books. And this whole time, I never, ever, ever even considered it as anything other than just a pleasant way, it's just a pleasant thing to read about, a pleasant thing to learn about. But slowly but surely, I thought, I really love this. This is something that, again, has meaning for me, right? And whereas the first shift from international public health to early childhood teaching was really a shift away from something, I was trying to get away from that feeling of disillusionment and disconnection and just dissonance with what my values were and what my job was.
Yeah.
But as I'm exploring interior design, it isn't that I'm trying to get away from early childhood because I'm still quite happy,
Yeah.
but I'm moving towards something that I don't have, and that being creativity.
Yes. Interesting.
So it feels different. It's also it's kind of a shift that I'm contemplating and sort of actively pursuing at least part time, but it isn't the same type of shift. So this is really a shift towards creativity because creativity is not something that I've cultivated a huge amount in my life. Sort of visual creativity, I would say. I
Yes.
mean,
Yeah.
there's lots
Yeah.
of creativity in being an early childhood teacher,
Yeah.
but visual creativity that comes from my sort of creative soul and brain is not something that I've done a lot in my brain in my life, and that's what I'm moving towards right now. And
Yeah.
the more I move towards it, the more I just felt like this is so exciting. And when you're, at least for me, job searching, career shifting, it can be like the first time for me where I just knew I didn't want to do what I was doing, and I just had no idea and just would have to feel in the dark until I
Yeah.
found something. This is different. This is no, like something kind of found me, or I found
Yes.
something.
Yeah.
And so now I'm exploring that thing, right? So it can look in all sorts of different ways.
Yes.
And so sort of then I know how to do this, right? So I'm like, okay, so now I need to get some training. So I'm doing an interior design course. It's
Okay.
always good, I think, to get some credentials under your belt,
Yes. Yeah.
both because you need to be, you need to be credible, you need to be reputable,
Yes.
and you need to be good at what you're going to be
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah.
But you also need to be credible in the eyes of others. So both in
Yes.
your own sense of
Yeah.
yourself as the new professional, but also in others' ability to trust in your
Yeah.
in your in your expertise. So I'm finishing that up now and have done all sorts of short courses
Yeah.
over the past couple years. And I've started a Substack, which is how,
Yeah. Which is
right, which
great,
is
and I love
where
it.
thank you, which is where we connected. Um, and the Substack has been such a wonderful way for me to, like, I basically use it as a rigorous way to explore creativity,
Yeah.
right? I'm not turned on paid yet. So it's just me and my creativity. And I've just
Yeah.
been deciding my journey through the exploration of
Yeah.
interior design, right? Just like any career change, you think, oh, I'm really interested in this, but that this has 10,000 different legs, right? There's so
Yeah.
many different things you could do
Yeah.
within teaching, within interior design,
Yes.
within music, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I have been allowing myself to really lean into that creativity that's
Yeah.
fueled by me,
Yeah.
and waiting for the time until I felt experienced enough, confident enough
Yeah.
to sort of peddle my wares to
Yeah.
others.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of almost a year in now, and I've finally reached that point. I think, no,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
something to say, and I have found a piece
Yeah.
of interior design I love, like color.
Yeah.
I use artificial intelligence
Yeah.
to explore interiors, but also in particular color.
Yeah.
And that journey into a new career, it takes a while, it takes a while to sort of find your thing. And I think it's important to sort of let it go, right? So
Yeah.
I'm now to the point where I think, okay, yes, I can start to think about asking for money and sort of presenting
Yeah.
myself as a part-time
Yeah.
professional in this space.
Yes.
But I don't feel the need to sort of say, okay, this is my rock, and I'm gonna die on this interior design rock.
Yeah.
I'm not there yet, but that's okay, right?
Yeah.
That's okay. It's a process of finding out exactly what area in that new place that you want to live, and it will probably evolve over time.
Yeah, I'm finding it so interesting to hear this because I think we have so much in common with
We
our kind of,
do, we do.
there's so many parallels. But I agree with you, and I think in some ways, I guess perhaps we're quite lucky that teaching is the sort of profession that does allow. I mean, I'm doing some part-time teaching, so it frees up the rest of my week. But at least we get holidays and things like that,
Indeed.
which give us that freedom, I guess, that maybe some other jobs don't have to explore those things. But what you say about kind of allowing your own voice within this new this new career, I guess, to evolve over time and for you to find it is exactly how I'm kind of approaching it as well. And maybe it's something
Mm.
about confidence of being a bit older and wiser, and for you having gone through all the different, you've already done a career change once, so you know how that feels, but you can tap into those feelings, I guess, and use them. And it's a nice feeling, isn't it, to feel like it's gradually just evolving and kind of I feel like somebody said to me the other week, it's like it's just working away in your brain in the background, and then every so often you have those moments, don't you, of this is what I need to do.
Oh, that's such a good way of putting it. It
Yeah,
is. It's doing its thing,
yeah,
even though you might not be part of that
yeah,
process consciously.
yeah. And
Um,
I think that's just really, really amazing. That we can kind of, yeah, just have those thoughts bubbling away in the background, and then it's like a light bulb moment occasionally where you think, this is what I need to do. And yeah, and and also, I guess, like you say, within interior design, like any field of anything creative, it's such a huge and wide term that encompasses so much. And once you start delving
mm,
into it, as you will have done over the course of the last few years when you've been studying and I've been doing the same, you realize that there
yeah.
isn't just one way of doing it either, is there? There's so many different approaches. And actually working out what your life experience brings to that approach is quite important, I think. But it's exciting, and I can hear the excitement for you as well, that how you give over a sense that you're really excited about what's next.
I am excited about what's next, absolutely, and excited about even the process, right? The process
Yes. Yeah.
of of finding out what that next thing
Yes.
um, is exciting. And I think I agree that as teachers, we definitely have the privilege of time that some people didn't have. And like the last time I did this, I had to ask for a
Yes.
sabbatical from my
Yeah.
job. That was an unpaid sabbatical, right? I mean,
Yeah.
those are privileges that not everybody has. However, I also think that it doesn't have to be that drastic. It doesn't have to be that drastic.
No.
While there are so many things bubbling in our brains, and we can trust those things, it can be hard to trust them. Um, but at the same time, there does need to be that outward motion, right? Like you
Yes.
need to take the course, or
Yeah.
talk to the professional, or
Yeah.
so it's both, right? And I think
Yeah.
it can be hard to trust the piece that's happening in our heads. But if we try and trust it only, and think that the fully fleshed out idea, new career, is going to pop
Yes.
into our brains one night in the shower,
Yeah.
like maybe, and so for some people it is that easy. But I do think that the outward worldly talking is
Yeah.
really important as well.
Yeah. And I guess that having done that several years back when you were trying to figure out what your first career change was, all those informational interviews that you did will have been really informative for you even now, I guess, in terms
Absolutely.
of helping you to work that out. And I think it's really important, isn't it, for everybody to recognize that um, everything we've done in our lives is helping us and leading us
Mm.
to these decisions. And it's all really wonderful, rich experience, both the good things that have happened, the bad things that have happened, and everything in between is building towards helping us to make the next decision or the next choice, and to help us to be better informed, I guess, and to know ourselves better, perhaps. um
I think knowing ourselves better is probably one of the most important
yeah,
things. Yes,
yeah,
and just to have the confidence that life experience brings, which is
definitely.
not nothing at all. Um, I think that it's it can be really scary. Like, so this time around is so much easier psychologically because I know sort of the road,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and even with it being easier psychologically, it is still like, I'm trying to think of the things that have been helpful, like having a guide of some sort, right? Whether that be a career coach or like a community, like an online community. I'm part of several online communities
Yeah.
of, like solopreneurs or interior designers. Like,
Yeah.
it's good. It's hard to do completely on your own.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
there's just too much to manage. So I think it's really helpful to connect to many different communities, and to know that you might think that you found the thing and then discover that thing is not the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily a really linear road.
Definitely. And I think it's good to acknowledge that early on, isn't it? And embrace that. And you mentioned earlier about the process. Do you think that being older and wiser allows you to enjoy the process in a way that when you were younger, you found maybe harder?
Yes, it allows me to make decisions with more resolve, you know. So it makes me, so if I'm going to choose to spend money on joining a community or choose to spend money on
Yeah,
a course, I can do that with more resolve. I kind of know myself, what
yeah,
I'm willing to do time wise.
yeah,
Um, I understand that this can go somewhere
yeah,
if I put in the time, because I know what my sort of discipline
yeah,
limitations are.
yeah,
Um, One thing that you mentioned, I think that I'm um, working through right now, and certainly don't have an answer to, is this idea that we have this whole lifetime of experience that that informs and helps, and skills that we can use in our new pursuits. And the blend of like how explicitly that needs to be is something I'm playing with right now, right? So when I did international public health to teaching, that really felt like completely different. Though in the end, when I was actually teaching, I thought, well, this is just, it's also still helping people. It's also
yeah,
quite social. In the end, it's actually not that different.
yeah,
Um, and then again, I'm like in teaching to interior design, that again feels super duper different.
yeah,
But what I'm working through right now is this feeling of, do I want to just, you know, quote unquote throw away all those years? Like, should I do interior design for families, right? I mean, should I try and directly tap into my experience, or is it okay that it's just the body of experience that informs me as a
yes,
confident person, right?
yeah.
And that is something that I'm still working through.
Yes, I think it's a really interesting one, and I listened to a podcast a few months back. It's an interior design podcast. You may have come across it. I think it's just called the Interior Design Podcast. I'll send you a link
Mm,
to it afterwards. But
thanks.
I heard an episode of that where they were talking to three or four different interior designers who had all come to interior design at different points in their lives. So there was one person there who'd done it from the point of doing an undergraduate degree in interior design when they were 18, 19,
Mm,
gone through that sort of standard route, I guess, if you like. And then there were several others who had come to it later in their lives and come from different backgrounds and different careers. And really the whole thing that they were talking about was whether um, that life experience of having done a previous career, because I think it's quite common in the industry of interior design,
it does seem
certainly
to
in
be.
London, but that people have come from different backgrounds of careers and then found their way into it. But there was a really interesting discussion about it, and obviously there's pros and cons to both sides of it.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard on that there was a lady who'd also been a teacher, and had switched. I'm hoping to interview her actually for this podcast series, because I really
Oh,
liked what I
great.
heard on that, and I thought she'd be great crossover for this. But yes, it was just interesting to hear a particular industry where there were a lot of people that were career changers within it. It was almost an accepted part that that was something that people often did, and also that it didn't. And this was what I found helpful to hear. It was accepted that your credibility was not affected by the fact that you might have done a different
Uh-huh.
career beforehand, which I think is
Mm-hmm.
where I've
Mm-hmm.
come to this point from. Because it's easy to feel that a little bit, isn't it? I've certainly felt like that. You think,
Absolutely.
who's going to trust me with their living room design? I've been a music teacher for the last 15 years, but the reality is that we both, I'm sure, have a huge amount of expertise and experience and can draw on, like you said, should I do interior design for families? Well, maybe that is a good way of tapping into it. And in fact, I had a client a month or so ago who got in touch with me because she knew about my musical background, and her son was about 16 and he was a musician, he was a percussionist, and he had loads of percussion
Mm.
instruments in his bedroom, and it was his bedroom that we were looking at trying to kind of reconfigure and redecorate. But he had a marimba in there and
Oh,
a sort of sections of various bits of drum kit and things. So it was there was a musical link to it, and that in itself made me realize, yes, there are these crossover points when you kind of least expect them.
indeed, indeed, indeed. I think there's a lot of richness in the transition later. I think on the flip side, thinking about what's more difficult this time around versus last time, I think is the just the complexity that comes of being later in life. Like, so for me, I'm married and have a child. And so, it's just not me anymore, right? I'm
Yeah.
sort of happy at the time, like, well, we'll just see how it goes.
Yeah.
And so I think in general, the older you are, there's a little bit
Yeah.
less ability or even tolerance to say, well, we'll just see how it
Yeah, of
goes.
course. Yeah.
And there's also, again, something I'm working through now is there's also the figuring out if you want the transition to be complete or not, right? So, for example, you're doing both right now, and
Mm,
I'm still doing, sort of full time one plus,
mm,
part timing on the new one and just getting started with that. And
yeah.
I don't know that I want to leave teaching completely. I don't,
Yes.
it's so later on. There's more. You've just got so much more invested
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
careers that you have been in, and they've brought hopefully
Yeah.
joy,
Yeah.
certainly have in my case.
Yeah.
So I think it's more nuanced the later you are in life, and there's just more to consider
Definitely.
this time around.
I would
Um,
totally agree with that. I think, yeah, I'm still not clear whether I will eventually want to give up teaching completely or not. And actually, I've kind of, I'm happy with that at the moment. I'm
yeah,
just
we
happy
don't need to
to
know.
see where it goes and
Yeah.
find out in the future. And I think sometimes it's okay to be like that. But yeah, it's a different approach, definitely, for sure.
Mm.
Um, you've touched on this a little bit, but along the way of your career changes, have you always had people around you, friends, family, that have supported you in those career changes?
Mm. I think definitely so yes, the short answer is yes. I've not had any strong naysayers in general. Everybody in my life has been supportive. I think when I left my lifetime guaranteed, my lifetime of financial security
Yeah,
and social prestige, when I
yeah,
said goodbye to that, there were certainly people who said, "What?"
yeah,
Not in a you're crazy kind of way, but just in a really,
yeah,
are you sure kind of way. Um, but certainly I didn't have to fight against the current of family or friends, and that's absolutely helpful. Partly just because my narrative was very clear.
yeah,
I mean, if you're clear in either wanting to leave something or wanting to move towards something, and why you're doing that, then you can explain that,
yeah,
and if you believe it, then people will understand it. So I think that also makes a really big difference. And if you're not ready to make that explanation, then maybe, keep it to yourself,
yes,
right? You don't
yes,
need to share
yeah,
before you're ready to share.
yeah. I think that's definitely true. And you're right that when anybody approaches anyone else and tells them something with conviction and real belief in it, then the majority of the time the reactions are positive, aren't they? Because
Yeah.
yourself as well as anybody else. And I think yeah, it's always good when the support is there, because it helps to reinforce that maybe the decision is the right decision yourself as well, I guess.
Indeed, indeed. And I think that's another reason why it's important to find community. Maybe that's your direct sort of family
Yes.
and friends community, but it's important to find, probably in addition to that, external communities, because there will be communities where your idea that sounds a little out there or even way out there in your existing communities
Yeah.
sounds completely normal and typical, right?
Yes.
Like whatever you're thinking, there's a group of people who've been doing that for a really long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
And so it's really helpful to seek those people out
Yeah.
and to hear those stories like, okay, yeah, this is normal to a certain group of people.
Yeah.
This is what they've been doing.
No, you're right, and it's seeking feedback from the right people. And it's interesting you say this, because I'm reading a book at the moment that was recommended to me by Hannah Kirkbride, who I interviewed a few weeks back. Her
Mm,
podcast is going to come out next week, actually. But it's
okay.
a book called Playing Big by Tara Moore, and it's, I
Oh,
don't know if you've heard of it or read of it, but it's great.
I've read it. I've read it.
It's so good. And
So
I'm
good.
on the part at the moment where she's talking about feedback, and she says this, that when you're seeking feedback from people, actually you have to choose carefully the group of people or the
Mhm.
person that you seek the feedback from, because actually friends and family often don't give you the feedback that you need, because their relationship with you is different. And if it's a professional decision or a professional thing that you're seeking the feedback on, friends and family aren't necessarily the right people for it. So I totally agree with you that finding those communities that do have the right people, that have the expertise and the experience to be able to provide helpful feedback, is probably more useful than the nice thing that you're family might say, or sometimes the opposite perhaps, but often family will say the nice thing, or be looking to protect, I guess, is the other thing that
Indeed.
sometimes people family don't always encourage you to do something because they're worried, and they worry that for the worst. But actually speaking to the professional people that are in that field are going to give you a more nuanced and honest answer, I guess. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I've really experienced that. Even like speaking to the right people about the right thing,
Yes.
so I have people in my life who, like you said, they're trying to protect me
Yes.
and are really rational and are super helpful to talk to about very rational things.
Yeah.
And during this process of, there's a lot of ideation happening. There's a lot of sort of big picture thinking, well, what if I did this? And what about that? And I've recognized that, the people who are really great to speak to about the rational questions in my life are the worst people to speak to when I have this like very sort of nebulous, great idea, what I think is a great idea.
Yeah.
What about if I did this? What about I did? Because their approach is so rational that the idea is not ready for that. The idea is not ready to be broken down into rational, like, how am I going to pay taxes on that? I mean, I'm not even there yet.
Not at that point. Yeah.
Not at that point. So it's like the right people for the right specific things. And there's just so many aspects that it's very likely that your family and friend cohort are not going to be able to meet all those needs.
Yeah. No, I think that's very good advice. My last question for you is, do you have a piece of advice that you would give to somebody who is perhaps listening to this and considering making a career change? What would be your top piece of advice for that person?
Oh, that's tricky. My very top piece of advice. I think my top piece of advice would be to follow meaning, like, there's so many things we can follow. So to me, follow meaning, but in your life, to follow whatever is meaningful to you, right? So we all have our own values. And so in my life, for example, my top value has not been financial, like following financial stability for the detriment of all else, right? Otherwise, I'd be working for the United Nations right now.
Sure. Yeah.
But for some people that is, right? So if that's your top value, then follow that, right? So I think that's try to sort of figure out, this is my best parenting advice I've ever received, was figure out what your values are for parenting and parent to that.
Yes.
And it makes everything so much easier, because every time I make a decision, even small decisions, should he do like the music class or the football class? Should he do this or that? I know what my values are. It just makes it faster. So these are really big, multi-step transitions, multi-year transitions often for careers. And there's so much noise. And so I think, spend some time thinking, like, what are your real core values for your life moving forward? Not what they used to be, but what they are now. And they can be whatever, right? I mean, if you want to be, as wealthy as possible, like, to the detriment of all else, fine, that's your value, then follow that. But just be clear on what that meaning is, right? Your particular value meaning, and follow that. And I think that makes decision making easier. At least it has done so for me.
Yeah. No, I think that's excellent advice. I like that approach. So hopefully there's somebody out there that is listening and will find that very useful. So thank you.
Hopefully.
Vanessa, thank you so much for talking to me today. It's really nice to finally meet you, albeit virtually, because we've had lots of message exchanges and emails and things, and it's really nice to actually connect. So thank you so much. It's been really lovely to speak.
Absolutely. I really echo that. And like you said, we have so much in common. And again, this is another form of sort of finding a member of my community, right?
Yes,
who has such a similar experience. And it's so helpful to connect. So I really have appreciated the time and look forward to future connections as well.
Thank you so much. That was Vanessa Edwards talking to Hannah Ash on the Shay Hanny podcast. This episode is episode 7 in the series, and if you're interested in listening to the previous episodes, head over to shayhanny.substack.com, where you can listen to everything. Wishing you all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll be back in the new year with a brand new episode. See you then.